Anyway, all right, so we're going to try to record this. One of the reasons I tell you to print off those notes is because you don't want to try to write down absolutely everything that's on some of these slides. And because a lot of it's very wordy like this, and we're going to talk about these things and that kind of stuff. But I just think it's helpful if you can just be able to make your own notes in terms of this. So that's kind of the purpose of that. The other thing I'm going to tell you is you can use a scientific calculator. I think a graphing calculator is really overkill. We don't allow them typically in the classroom. And it really, I don't think it helps you. I think it does things that just make your life more difficult. So it's certainly not going to do anything that's going to give you a great advantage. And most people get kind of caught up in the messiness of it. So just a regular scientific calculator is really all you need. It just makes your life a little bit nicer and easier. So we're going to start off by, this is the very first part of chapter R, and which is the review chapter. And then after we finish doing the math, we're going to try to get everybody set up in their MyLabs Plus account. So hopefully, even if you don't have your access code today, I'm going to show you how to use a temporary access code so that we can get everybody set up and started so that you can start doing homework and that kind of fun stuff. So I know, it's amazing. So starting off just talking about adding and subtracting real numbers. And this is just reminder of how to do this. So if you have two numbers that have the same sign, essentially we're going to combine those two numbers. So if the numbers are, and I'm just going to give you a couple of examples here. Let's say I just have 2 plus 3. Well, that's pretty nice and straightforward, and that's just going to give us 5 because we can take 2 steps forward and then 3 steps forward, and we end up 5 steps from where we started with. However, if those numbers are both negative and I have a negative 2 plus a negative 3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the same sign here. So I'm going to add this and give me 5, but those 5s are negative. Think about this as adding 2 apples to 3 apples, and I have 5 apples, and 2 oranges to 3 oranges, and I have 5 oranges. So think of that negative as the kind of thing that you have. So you can add these kind of like terms together and we just get more of those things, okay? If I'm subtracting, then my subtraction takes on a little bit different concept here. And so before we talk about subtraction, we need to talk about what happens if I have different signs. So if I had a problem, let's say I have a positive 2 plus a negative 5. And so the rule is that I take the difference in the two numbers and the sign of the larger value. And to me, that's always been a little bit confusing because when I look at this, I think, well, a negative is a smaller number. So I don't necessarily really like the definition that we have here. Here's what I want you to think about. Because you do have a calculator, but if you're not careful and you put things into the calculator wrong, then the calculator just spits out to you what it thinks you want, okay? So here's what I want you to think about this as. Let's think about if I climbed up a mountain 2 steps, but then I climbed down the mountain 5 steps and I was able to go into the ground, okay? Then that means I would be below the ground by 3 steps. So my answer here would be a negative 3. I usually like to, because sometimes we're getting close to football season, and I don't know whether we're close to football season or not, but I always like to think of this as, the football players and the little guy who's got the ball and he runs forward 2 yards, but then somebody hits him and he pushes him back 5 yards. Well, he's back behind where he started with, and so he's in a negative place. However, if I have a number such as this, if I'm adding negative 2 plus a positive 5, in this case, for whatever reason he ran, or he got pushed backwards 2 yards, but then he ran forward 5 yards, he actually finishes in a positive place. So if you could dig a hole down 2 feet, and then you could climb out 5 feet, you would be above the ground level. So if you have opposite signs, you look at the difference in the two values of those numbers, and your final answer is going to take on the one that has the larger value. So in this case, my larger value is a 5, and it is a negative number. And my larger value here is is the 5, and it has a positive value. So hopefully that reminds you about adding and subtracting adding real numbers. And so we're going to talk about the subtracting of them too. So, and we're going to work some problems here, but I just kind of like to show you this. So we'll look at some subtraction problems in just a minute. But I just kind of want to remind you about the addition part. When we multiply and divide these numbers, just keep in mind that same sign, we get a positive, different signs, we always get negative. And that doesn't matter whether I'm multiplying or whether I'm dividing. Okay, so if I divide two positive numbers, I get a positive. If I divide a negative and a positive, I'm going to get a negative. Okay, so we'll come back to these if we need to, but let's start working on some just kind of nice problems like this. Okay, so we're going to start here with this one. And like I said, I promised you some subtraction problems too. If you get to a point where you're like, can we see one more of those? Then all you got to do is you can even type me a private message and say, can I see one more of those? Or you can just ask it out loud, okay? So we're going to start here. We have -3 plus 10. So another way to do this, and I'm only going to do this once, but sometimes I think that this is kind of a nice visual. Sometimes we've gotten so used to putting this in the calculator that we don't think about it. So if I want to go -3, I'm going to go here. So here's a -3. But then from there, I'm going to add to that a positive. And so I'm going to end up over here in the positive realm. The difference of these two numbers is 7, though. And so my final answer is going to be a +7. Okay. And so we do give you a calculator for this, but you need to make sure that the calculator is producing reasonable numbers. Because if you're not careful, sometimes you put in strange things. So you need to know what's a reasonable number, okay? All right, number 2 here, I have two negative numbers. I have -11 plus -15. I'm adding these two together. Like I said a while ago, it's like having 11 oranges and 15 oranges. My final answer is going to be a group of oranges. And so a negative and a negative added together is going to be a negative number. And so then I add the values of 11 and 15. And that's going to give me 26. And so my final answer here is a -26. Okay. So far, so good. Color screen, throw things. Ooh, y'all can't throw things at me, yay. Okay, all right. So here's my subtraction problem. And so I mentioned subtraction a while ago. So the rule for subtraction is that, that I change the sign and I add. So real quickly, I'm going to do a couple of other subtraction problems over here, and then we're going to come back to this one. So, because sometimes I think we need more examples than I give you to begin with. So let's say I have 5 minus 3. That's easy peasy. That's just like, that's takeaway from elementary school. I had 5 apples. Somebody ate 3 of them. That left me with 2 of them. That's nice. We like that. However, if I have 3 and I subtract 5 from that, well, I know the difference in 3 and 5 is 2, but I had more of this. So in other words, I took away more than what I had. So another way to think about this is to say, okay, well, this is, I add the opposite. And that's actually the rule for subtraction, is that I add the opposite of the second number. So I change it to an addition problem, and I change the sign on the second number. And that kind of allows you to see where I'm getting that -2, because it goes back to those addition problems. So keep in mind that physically what happens here is I had 3 of something and I removed 5 of them. Well, I removed more than what I had. That's why I'm going to end up with this negative value, but it goes back to this addition problem. Okay, with that said, let's go back to this problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this into an addition problem. This becomes 3 plus, and then the opposite of my -9 is going to be a +9. And so I have a final answer here of +12. Okay, so I'm subtracting this negative, kind of like thinking in English of the double negatives, and the double negatives are bad news in English. Well, a double negative in math means a positive. Okay, so if I have a subtract a negative, it means I'm going to add that. And so my final answer here is 12. Okay. Once again, I know you have a calculator to use, but I just think some of these basic concepts are really important, because the calculator just is only as good as you can punch stuff into it. So, all right. Fractions are our friends. That becomes our mantra because I know most of you go fractions. I hate fractions. I don't like fractions, but we can make these work, I promise. So let's start with this one. What we need when we add and subtract fractions is we have to have a common denominator. So I'm going to show you kind of the short and easy way to do this. When we get to some more complicated ones, we might look at some other ways. But I'm going to rewrite this -2/11, mainly because I don't like the way it's written there, plus 7/9. Now here's the short and easy and friendly way to do this. So I'm going to take the denominators and multiply them together. So my denominator is 99. Okay. And so now to get my numerator, I'm going to take 9 times 2 is 9 times -2 is -18. And then plus 11 times 7, or 77. And that's a shortcut. And it gives you a common denominator, and it allows you to add the two fractions with different denominators. And so now I have a -18 plus 77, once again, a positive and a negative that I'm adding together. So that positive and that negative that I'm adding together, I know my final answer is going to be positive because 77 has a larger value than 18. And so I'm going to take the difference of those numbers. My denominator is 99. And my numerator is going to be, I have to stop, and this one's like one of these I have to actually stop and think about. So it looks like I'm going to get 59. 17. Yeah, sometimes I can't add and subtract in my head, so bear with me. And that is my final answer. Some of your calculators will do this. Some of your calculators will do fractions. And if you're not sure how to get your calculator to do a fraction, if you want to jump on a WebEx session with me sometime and we can look at it together. But sometimes your calculators do fractions and they leave the answer as a decimal, and you're going to want to be able to turn it back into a fraction. So just be careful of that. I can show you some things on the calculator that's on my computer, but just beware that, just be careful and make sure that you get your final answer as a fraction. I don't care if you use a calculator for your fractions, that's fine. It's called the real world, and in the real world, you would use a calculator if you weren't 100% sure. So the big thing here is I need you to recognize that I have a negative plus a positive, so that I need to make sure I know which of these is the larger value. 7/9 is larger than 2/11, so my answer is going to be a positive here. All right. Trying to look, make sure there's no questions. Okay. All right, so we're going to look at some multiplication and some division problems. So this first one up here is just a really nice multiplication problem. Sometimes we'll use the little dot symbol, and sometimes we'll just use the parentheses. We try to avoid using the times symbol most of the time because it starts to look like an X. And so if I multiply a negative and a positive, because I have a positive 3 times a -9, doesn't matter which one is first or second. It doesn't matter which one is larger. I'm going to get a negative, and then 3 times 9 is 27. And so my final answer here is -27. I love multiplication because you don't have to think real hard. Okay. Number 2, I have a -5 times a -4. Negative times a negative. I have 2 negatives. That's going to give me a positive. And then 5 times 4 is going to be 20. You do not need to put the positive sign on there. If you don't put any sign, it's understood to be positive. We multiply fractions just like we multiply integers in terms of the signs, but the rule for multiplying fractions, real quick, I'm going to write this over here. If I have one fraction a over b times the second fraction c over d, the nice thing is I multiply straight across a times c over b times d. I can simplify if possible, and if I can't simplify, then I'm just done. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how to simplify this as we go. Some of you love to simplify beforehand. Some of you don't like to simplify beforehand. So it's really kind of up to you. Big thing here is the negative times a negative is going to be a positive. 2 times 1 is going to be 2 in the numerator. And notice what I have here is I have 4 times 9 in this denominator. Now I'm going to show you two different ways to do this. One is this is going to give me 36. And this will simplify because 2 and 36 are both even numbers. So 2 divides into 2 and gives me 1. And 2 divides into 36 and gives me 18. So my final answer is 1 over 18. Usually I only show you one way to do things, but for this particular problem, I'm going to show you a second way to do this because I do think it's important if you don't remember this. So I have negative, let me change this color. I have a negative 1/4 times a negative 2/9. And so when I think about this, I have a negative 1 times a negative 2 in the numerator, and I have a positive 4 times a positive 9 in the denominator. If anything will simplify, I can actually simplify it here. And so the negative and negative are going to give me a positive, but 2 divides into 2 one time, and 2 divides into 4 2 times. And so now I have this negative 1 times negative 1 is going to be a positive 1. And 2 times 9 is going to be 18. And so I have 1/18, and I get the same thing either way. So it's just a way to simplify along the way if you want to. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. You can simplify at the end. The nice thing about MyLabs Plus is in the homework, a lot of times if you were to type in 2 over 36, it would say, hey, that's the right answer, but you need to simplify it, or you need to change the form of it. And so that would tell you to simplify the 2/36 down to 1/18. The other thing in MyLabs Plus, and once again, I'm going to show you this, I hope, towards the end of class, it will put a little box at the bottom of the answer. There's like a blank for the answer, and there'll be a little box, and it'll say, type your answer as a fraction, or it'll say, type your answer as a decimal. And so you'll know what kind of answer to put in there. So hopefully that will be helpful. All right, so now we're going to divide. This is a nice division problem, 4 divided by 2. Hopefully we all know that 4 divided by 2 is a 2, but because I have a positive divided by a negative, my answer is going to be a negative 2. And so my answer here is going to be here. We're going to do 4b over here because I want to do a different one. We're going to do negative 12 divided by negative 3. And so now I have a negative divided by a negative, and so that's going to be a positive value, and so 12 divided by 3 is going to be 4. So just a second option there. Hopefully you also remember that a fraction is just a fancy way to write a division problem, and so this is just another way to write negative 16 divided by positive 4. And however you slice it, it doesn't matter. I'm going to have a negative divided by a negative. It's going to give me a negative answer. And 16 divided by 4 is 4. And so my final answer is a negative 4 here. So division, fractions, either one tells me to do the same operation. You doing okay? All right. Now, division of fractions. So multiplication of fractions, real quick, go back, looks like this, okay? Division of fractions, you probably learned at some point in time, keep, change, flip, okay? KCF. So we keep the first part. So if we have a division problem, A over B divided by C over D. We keep the first part, so A over B. We change the operation to multiplication, and we flip the second part. And now all of a sudden, I have a fraction multiplication. So keep, change, and flip, okay? So the other way, old school way, I learned division becomes multiplication by the reciprocal. You multiply by the reciprocal, or the multiplicative inverse, or whatever. They made me remember big words. So A times D then divided by B times C. Right? So keep, change, and flip gives me a multiplication problem. So I would suggest, and when we get to some messier problems with the algebra part, I would highly recommend that you go through this process. And so I'm going to go through it with the numbers. And so I have negative 1/3, and then it becomes multiplication by the flip or the reciprocal, so 8/5. So now I have negative 1/3 times 8/5. And so this is then going to become negative, and a negative and a positive gives me a negative 8, and 3 times 5 gives me 15. And so my final answer is negative 8/15. The next one, I have two negatives that are being divided. So you really can, if you get to the point you're super comfortable with this, negative divided by negative, when you write this down, you could write down two positive fractions because you know the result is going to be the same. And sometimes dragging those negatives around is just cumbersome and you make careless mistakes. But I will leave it up to you. It is fine whichever way you want to do this. So I have a negative 1/4, and I'm going to change my operation to multiplication, and I'm going to flip this and make it a negative 16/7. It doesn't matter whether the negative sign's in the numerator or denominator. It's going to be the same either way. So now I multiply straight across, and so my final answer, negative and negative, is positive, and so I have a positive 16 over a positive 28. Some of you are like, hey, could I divide that? Absolutely. Or you can divide it here. 4 divides into both of these. And so if you want to make a little note, I'm dividing 16 by 4, leaving me with 4. I'm dividing 28 by 4, leaving me with 7. And my final answer is a positive 4/7. Again, you could have gone and said, hey, 4 divides into 16. I'm going to simplify that. If you are working a multiplication problem and you have something in the numerator and denominator that divide or simplify, you can do that along the way. Right? I haven't taught for like multiple hours in a row in like multiple months, so y'all have to bear with me in my water here. Okay, my favorite two problems here, because I think this is like one of the biggest concepts that that folks miss in elementary and middle school and high school and whatever, and they think their calculators are being crazy, but they're not. So this problem says 0 divided by 7, and this problem says negative 7 divided by 0. It doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. I don't care about that part. 0 on the top gives me 0 for my answer. I don't care whether these are positive or negative numbers. 0 divided by 7 is still going to be 0, okay? Think about it as if I had 0 items to give to you guys, and we were all in a classroom, and I had 0 cookies to give you, and I gave everybody one of them. Well, that would be kind of silly and hard to do because I have 0 things to give you, so everybody would get nothing, all right? Because there's nothing to distribute, and there's nothing to divide up, and so therefore you get nothing. So if I start with 0, I don't care how many pieces I divide it into, I still have 0. However, if I have some number, positive or negative, it doesn't matter, and I try to divide it amongst 0 people, that's just weird, okay? So division by 0 is not possible. And we simply say, we can't do this. It is not possible, right? If you punch it into your calculator, if you do negative 7 or positive 7 divided by 0, it's going to probably say math error. Okay, and it's not because of human error, it's because we can't divide something by 0. Somebody told me one time that their elementary teacher, and I was like, hey, that's actually a really cool idea. They said you can't step into a hole because you fall. So think about it as you're over this hole and you're going to fall down. And so it's not going to work, okay? But the easiest thing is just to know that you can't divide anything into 0 pieces. It's just not happening for us. And so we say division by 0 is not possible, okay? So keep in mind, another way to write this is to say 0 divided by 7, and that's going to be 0. And this is some number divided by 0. If my divisor is 0, this is simply not possible. We can't do this, okay? So big deal there, just be careful. Let's see. Okay, questions. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is absolute value. I love absolute value because it gives us all these lovely positive numbers. Absolute value literally is it's how far something is from zero. And I usually try to tell students that, I mean, and you can even see the definition here, absolute value is a distance. So if I were traveling from my house to Jackson, for example, I would travel, I don't know, a couple of 100 miles. Well, when I turn around and travel back from Jackson to my house, I don't go a negative distance. I still am traveling that same positive distance. So distance is always a positive number. And so if you can remember that absolute value means that I'm always going to get a positive value, then that's going to keep you out of trouble, okay? So absolute value is a distance. It is saying, what is the value of this number? Okay, a while ago I talked about, the negative representing oranges and the positives representing apples. Well, but I had this many of that thing. So what is the value of this number? And so as I look at this problem, I see the absolute value of negative 12. And the absolute value of negative 12 is 12. The value of that number, or the distance that number is from zero, is still 12 units. Okay? Now the difference is in problem number 2, I have this thing, this concept inside of my absolute value. And so it's, if you remember, and we're going to talk about order of operations, you have to take care of things that are inside before you can move out. It's kind of like when you get ready to start your day, there's certain things that you have to do before you ever walk outside of your house. So think of this as you've got to take care of everything inside of here before I can get outside of my absolute values. So the first thing I need to do is I need to take care of this operation, negative 3 minus 5. And so the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to make this negative 3. Subtract means I add the opposite, so negative 3 plus negative 5. And then this is going to give me negative, oh, apparently I was too still for too long. My lights turned off. Sorry about that. That's weird. I've never had that happen. So this is going to give me the absolute value of negative 8. And so now what is that value? That is going to be a positive 8. So take care of what's inside first and then move to your absolute value. The difference between 2 and 3 is number 2 has stuff inside my absolute values. Number 3 has 2 absolute values that are subtracted. And so for this one, I'm going to work this problem just right down here below this. And so I have to take care of, because the only thing inside this absolute value is a negative 6, and so it's going to have a value of 6. My operation here is subtraction. And then the absolute value of negative 4 is a positive 4. And so then 6 minus 4 has a value of 2. And so the difference between 2 and 3 is 2 is we have to take care of that operation inside the absolute values first. And then number 3 is we have to take care of those absolute values first, because there's only one thing inside of those. We doing okay? Kind of, sort of. All right, so I mentioned order of operations, and so here we're going to be talking about PEMDAS. But before we get to, or please excuse dear Aunt Sally, or we'll talk about a couple of different things. The first thing is just exponents, and just reminding you how to work with exponents. A lot of this very first material really is, it's just kind of refreshers of stuff that you're going, I know I've seen this. Some of it you've used recently, and some of it you're like, yeah, I know, I saw this at some point in time, but I don't remember it. So that's why we go back over this. So multiplication is actually defined as repeated addition. So exponents is actually repeated multiplication, okay? So if I have, we'll put numbers in here. I know people don't like letters. Let's say I have 3 to the 5th power. This means that I multiply 3 times itself 5 times. So the exponent tells me how many times I repeatedly multiply that base together, okay? So this is 243, I think. 81 times 3. Yes, 243. Okay, so 3 to the 5th power is 3 times 3, 5 times, and that's going to give me a value of 243. Right? So that's really like lovely exponents. They're fabulous. They help us out. Order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or PEMDAS. I learned to please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and then I had students who said, no, PEMDAS. So whatever you want to remember is okay. I don't care. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Here's where I need you to be careful. And that's why I put this statement down here. You do not have to do them in multiply before you divide, add before you subtract. These two guys go together. You do them from left to right. These two guys go together. You do them from left to right. Okay? So we're going to see some problems in a minute, but please make sure that as you're looking at a problem, you do want to take care of anything inside parentheses, simplify it, parentheses or absolute values. So the parentheses and the absolute value signs work the same. You want to take care of your exponents. And then as you work through the problem, you look at multiplication and division and you work them from left to right. And then you look at addition and subtraction and you work them from left to right. I have a friend who always sends me the little math things that, because I'm really not that much on social media. I have a little bit of social media presence, but I just have these accounts that I just kind of don't do anything with. But anyway, I have a friend who always sends me the things, if you're on social media, how these people get these math problems. And he's like, hey, can you figure this out? And it's always order of operations, because people don't realize you have to multiply and divide and left to right, add, subtract from left to right. So if you get one of those, just send it to me. We'll work it together. It'll be great. It'll be a fun intermediate algebra problem. Okay, so reminder of those things, and then we'll get to some messy ones. So 6 to the 2nd power, this is just 6 times 6, and 6 times 6 is 36. And we just love these little problems because these are friendly. Once again, your calculator probably has a y to the x button, or an x to the y button, or it has a caret button, okay? So if it has a caret button, you put in the number and then the caret and then the exponent. It just kind of depends. But when it's a problem like this, 6 to the 2nd power, you play with your calculator until you make it tell you 36. Again, if you have questions about your calculator, pull it out, come see me, hold it up to the screen, something like that. We can do amazing things with calculators. All right. So this one, before we do anything else, I want you to write on your paper what you think of the sign of this number is going to be. So I have negative 4 to the 3rd power. So think about how many negative signs we have, okay? All right, so now we're going to work it. So this is negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4, okay? Well, I'm going to do this in twos. So negative 4 times negative 4 is going to be a positive 16, because a negative times a negative. That's going to be 16 times negative 4. So now I have a positive times a negative. So my final answer here is going to be a negative. It's actually going to be a negative 64. If you're not careful and you don't put some of these in your calculator correctly, they're going to give you some strange answers. And so that's why it's important for you to know what the sign is supposed to be. An odd number of negative signs gives you a negative product. An even number of negative signs gives you a positive product. We only talked about negative times positive a while ago, but like I said, if I had a negative to a 4th power, it would be positive. A negative to a 5th power would be negative. So an odd number of negative signs gives me a negative answer. An even number of negative signs multiplied gives me a positive answer. When we talk about fractions and exponents, we do the top and the bottom. So one way we can think about this is negative 2 fifths, times negative 2 fifths. Or you can think about this as negative 2 squared over 5 squared. Either way, we're going to end up with a negative, and a negative is positive. 5 times 5 is 25. That is my final answer. Same thing here. Negative 2 squared is 4, and 5 squared is 25. So either way you want to think about this, if you're not careful and you put it into your calculator, you're going to get a decimal. So that's why I always want to make sure that you know how to do that without your calculator. All right. Doing okay? Nobody's waving flags at me. So I just forewarn you, if you raise your hand on here and I don't see you after several minutes, please feel free to unmute yourself and say, hello, I'm here. I'm trying to keep an eye on that, but I'm still trying to deal with this. Okay, order of operations. Here we go. So we look at this problem and the very first thing we see is the exponent. So that's number one. So I'm going to rewrite this as exponents have to come first. So 6 squared is 36. And then I'm going to write down exactly what I see. So divided by 2 times 4 plus 3. Okay, so here's where we have to be careful. Because as I look at this problem, I took care of my exponents. There are no parentheses. Multiplication and division. Do not do the multiplication first. You don't do the multiplication first because as I look at this problem from left to right, if I were to ask you to read these words up here, you would start here with order of operations. So you do multiplication and division together from left to right. So the first thing I do here is I divide. So I have to say 36 divided by 2 is 18. And then I have times 4 plus 3. And 18 times 4 is going to be my next step. And that's going to be 72 plus 3. And that's going to give me a final answer of 75. That is it. Now I'm done. Okay. That is a different answer than if I had done this multiplication problem first and then tried to divide it into 36. So please be careful. Okay? Multiplication and division together, reading from left to right. Okay? Biggest mistake people make. Biggest mistake. All right. So, next problem. So in this one, I don't have a parentheses, but I have an absolute value. And my absolute value is going to be treated just like I would a parentheses. So the first thing I need to do is to take care of what's inside my absolute value. I'm also going to take care of my exponent because I've got a parentheses kind of thing and an exponent. So I have negative 6 times the absolute value of, what is 4 minus 6? Well, 4 minus 6 is going to be a negative 2. So I have negative 6 times the absolute value of negative 2. And then I have plus, and I have 2 to the third power, which is 8. So in this case, now after today, I'm going to make people answer questions for me because I don't think I can talk to myself all summer. So, but I'm giving you all a chance to kind of get acclimated to this. So just beware that I'm going to go, hey, Raven, what's the answer to this question? Okay. And I'm going to pick on you guys. I'm sorry. Or I'll wait for you to answer me. But we're going to have some interaction because I just don't think I can talk to myself. Okay. So this next part now, though, I need to take care of my absolute value. And so I'm going to have negative 6 times, and the absolute value of negative 2 is a positive 2. And then I have plus 8 out here at the end. And so now I have to take care of multiplication. So multiplication is going to give me a negative 12 and then plus 8. And negative 12 plus 8 is negative 4. And so my final answer is negative 4. All right. Last one on this page. So when you have a fraction that you're trying to simplify, and one thing I will also tell you is pay attention to the directions when you do the homework. I'll try to line them up, and I talk about this, and this will probably say simplify or evaluate. But sometimes just reading those directions on the homework will help you on the quiz and on the test, so that when you get that kind of sense of, oh my gosh, what am I doing? You will have paid attention to the directions. So I encourage you to read the directions very carefully. So when you're simplifying or evaluating a problem that involves fractions, you want to take care of the numerator first and then the denominator separate. So you want to do these in two pieces. So we're going to start with the numerator here. So I look at this problem and I see multiplication and addition. That's the only two operations that are in the numerator. So I'm going to do my multiplication first. So I have negative 42 plus, and then I have this negative and a negative, and so that's going to be a positive 30. So I have negative 42 plus 30. In the denominator, we can only do two numbers at a time, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do these in pieces. So I have negative 7 plus 1, so I'm going to start off with this sum. And so negative 7 plus 1 is going to give me a negative 6 plus 6. In the numerator, I have a positive and a negative that I'm adding together. So I'm going to have a negative 12. And in the denominator, I get 0. And negative 12 divided by 0 is not possible. Hopefully you all wrote that on your paper. Okay? It's not 0. That's the big thing. Not 0. Right? Any questions? Kind of looking through to see if I got hands up. Okay. All right. So we just got a couple more problems to look at. So when we start talking about, so far, everything we've done has just had to do with real numbers. Adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, fractions, whole numbers, integers, all that good stuff. So when you put real number math together with algebra, the big thing that, and I usually get this from students, they're like, man, math was great until somebody threw the alphabet into it. Like, why? Why did you have to throw the alphabet into math? And I was like, yeah, well, I don't know. It just kind of takes the fun out of it. So it's okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start talking about why we use variables and how we use variables by allowing variables to be a place where we can substitute numbers in. And that's really all a variable is in algebra. It's just a way to, it's kind of a placeholder. If ever like held a place for somebody, maybe you were at some place and you had to go ahead and you had to save a seat for somebody. Well, a variable is really like saving a seat. Somebody's going to come and sit down in that seat. So we're going to put a number into that variable, and then we're going to do whatever the operations tell us to do, okay? And so that's really all the variables are. So in this case, we're given a value for A, so we're told to let A be equal to 2. We're told to let B be equal to negative 3. We're told to let C be equal to 4. And we're told to let D be equal to negative 5, okay? So in this particular problem, we want to evaluate, we want to substitute these values in, and we want to evaluate this. Notice there is no C in this expression. So we're not going to use this value, not in this part. We're going to use it down here, but not going to use it in part A. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through and we're going to start with 3. So we have 3 times A to the 4th power. So in place of that A, I'm going to put a 2. Notice how I replaced my variable with a parentheses. I will almost always do that because I think it's helpful for you to see that something is going in there, okay? And then we have plus 2. And then I have B squared, but I'm going to replace B with this value of negative 3. And then I'm going to have minus, but D has a value of negative 5. Now notice I put that in parentheses, especially because it's negative. We have to be really, really careful there. And now we're going to go about using our order of operations to clean this up, all right? And so here we go. So this is going to give me 3 times. Now I have to make sure that I do this first. I have to make sure I take care of my parentheses. So I have 3 times, and then 2 to the 4th power is going to be 16. So I have 3 times 16, and then plus 2 times, and a negative 3 squared is going to be positive 9. And here's where subtracting a negative is going to become plus 5. And so now I'm going to pull out my handy dandy calculator. My brain's too tired. 3 times 16 is 48. Never mind. So 48 plus 18 plus 5. And guys, if I were you, honest and truly, I would probably pull out your calculator, especially on your test. Work with, I'm a firm believer, if I'm going to give you a calculator, don't get the arithmetic wrong. So just don't. It's not worth it. So this is going to be 66 plus 5. And that's going to give me 71, I hope. If I'm wrong, somebody feel free to correct me. Sometimes I can't do arithmetic. I'm going to cheat and pull out my calculator too. Oh, look, I can do arithmetic. Yeah, I can't always add and subtract. I do some really crazy things sometimes. Okay. All right. Let's do the next one. Okay, so this one's got C's, B's, A's, and D's. It's got one of everything. So we're going to use absolutely every one of these numbers. So we're going to start with the C squared. So I'm going to have 2 times C squared. Well, C has a value of 4 for this problem. And then I'm going to have plus 4 times B. And B has a value of negative 3. And all of this is going to be over 3 times A, where A has a value of 2, and then plus negative 5. I still like putting that in parentheses. It makes me happy. Making me happy is what we're all about. So 2 times 16 plus, we have to be careful here, 4 times negative 3. That is a negative 12. We're going to write it just like that. And then in the denominator, I have 6 plus, and I have that negative 5. Notice I did my multiplication before I'm trying to do my addition. In the denominator here, 6 plus negative 5 is positive 1. In the numerator, I'm going to have 32 plus negative 12. And this is going to give me 20 over 1. Do not ever leave your answer as 20 over 1. That is awkward. We don't like 1 in the denominator. It's just weird. Things don't stand well on that little 1. They don't balance well, so we just get rid of it. My final answer is 20. That was fun. All right. This is it. We're going to finish this, and then we're going to set up our Milos Plus accounts. This is all we're doing today. See, this has been great. Y'all survived your first day of intermediate algebra. Okay, almost. We're not quite there, but we're getting there. Okay. So kind of like I mentioned, adding the like terms with the positives and the negatives, we're going to do the same things now with variables. So really and truly, think of this as 2 oranges plus 3 oranges is going to give us a total of 5 magic oranges, and that's it. That's my final answer, 5x. We're collecting together our like terms. When you collect together your like terms, you're collecting together the numbers in front. The numbers in front are called coefficients. Those are the things you're really putting together. I can't add apples to oranges, so yeah, no, I can't. So I can only add apples to apples, oranges to oranges, okay? So number 2 down here, I'm just going to move from left to right. And so 8y minus, and if you want to put a 1 in front of this, you are perfectly welcome to do that. But 8 minus 1 is going to give me 7y. And then 7y plus 3y is going to give me a total of 10y. And that's my final answer. Can I rearrange them, add them in a different way? Sure, you're still going to get 10y. sometimes we have these parentheses, and when we have these parentheses, what we do is we distribute. And so that means this 2 is multiplied times both of these numbers, and these two numbers are added together. And so what we're going to do is we do 2 times x, and then we do 2 times 5. And so that's going to give me 2x plus 10. Just simplifying these guys. So since 2 is multiplied times the whole parentheses, it has to be multiplied by each piece, and we keep that addition operation. And this last one is a little bit tricky, so we have to be careful. So we're going to simplify by getting rid of the parentheses in both pieces, and then we're going to collect together our like terms, so we have multiple steps here. So step 1 is to go through and multiply this -5, so I have a -5x. -5 times -3 is going to be a +15 here. You can kind of skip a step in there. I like to do that. My negative and negative gives me a positive. Fewer times I have to write extra numbers in there, the better. Minus, and then this is going to become, so I have a -2x. Don't forget to take, here's the biggest mistake people make. This negative is attached to this 2. So take it with you when you multiply it by the -4, and this becomes +8. And now we're going to collect together our like terms. I have these 2 guys. I like to color code these. Sorry about that. So these 2 guys, -5 and -2, go with my x's, and so I have a -7x. And then I have these 2 numbers that I can add together, 15 plus 8, whatever the operations here, I do those, and this is going to give me +23. And that is my final answer in all of its glory. Okay. I'm writing a website up here. It's probably on lots of other things. I don't write and talk well at the same time when I'm trying to spell things out, so I pause and think about this. So, okay, so anybody have math questions for me before we go any further? This is the material that's on the first homework assignment, R4, and it is due on, sorry, too many calendars in front of me. It is going to be due on Wednesday. Yes, I thought it was Wednesday. So it's all of our due dates are going to be, our due times are going to be at 11:59 p.m. except for tests, and we'll take tests during class time. So that doesn't mean you need to do the homework at 11:59 p.m. or take your quiz at 11:59 p.m. It just means you have until then. However, if you run across questions and you send me an email at 11 o'clock at night, I'm not going to answer you at 11 o'clock at night. So sorry, I did go to sleep. So, and I don't sleep with my phone, so I hate my phone at night. So it doesn't bother me. So you can send me an email. I just won't answer you. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So we good math-wise? Everybody's loving this and thinking, yes, this is fabulous. Okay. So here's what I want to do. I want you to go to this webpage and stay on WebEx with me. So hopefully we'll be able to do all of this together. And I want to walk you through activating and setting up your MyLabs Plus account. You should have this account. We just have to activate yours. And so your login is going to be, if you've never used this before, your login or your username is going to be your net ID. So it's like mine, like it's going to be like A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, whatever your net ID is. So that's going to be your username. And if you've never done this before, I'm going to get to a point and I'm going to show you, but you're going to have to tell it you forgot your password. Okay. And then it's going to send you a link and you're going to check your MSU email and you're going to reset your password. the first letter in your password needs to be a capital letter. It doesn't tell you that. It's a secret, and it just drives me crazy, and I can't make them put it in there. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go here, and then we're going to get to a point, and if you've got questions, if you run into problems, I'm going to try to share my screen with you guys once I get logged in. So if you'll go to this website, and get started, then like I said, I'm going to try to share my screen with you in just a second. So bear with me as we get through this. So I don't know what you're seeing right this minute. So okay, so let's see, share screen. Oh, here we go. Okay. And okay, did we change to this? Do y'all see Pearson MyLabs Plus for Mississippi State University? Eventually, okay, excellent. See some nods. Okay, one really huge important thing: if you Google search for MyLabs Plus, I don't know why, but the strangest places come up. Okay, make sure that when you Google search, it says for Mississippi State University, and you see this little Mississippi State icon. If you don't, you are in the wrong place and you will not have an account. Guaranteed. Did somebody do that, Nika?
Oh no, I just thought it was funny.
You would be amazed at the people who are like, I don't have an account. And I'm like, that says Elon University. You're right, you don't have an account. So anyway. Okay, so if you've used MyLabs Plus before, then you're going to click username, type in, and your password. Your username's your NetID. If not, you're going to click forgot your password because, well, you don't have a password. Okay. And I'm going to kind of show you what this is going to look like. Here's where you're going to enter your NetID. And then you're going to click continue. And then it's going to tell you it sent you an email, and you check your email. It is set up guaranteed to your MSU email account. So I'm not doing that because it'll do bad things to my account. So I'm just going to go back here and log in and wait for you guys to get there. And then you'll come back to that page, and I have way more stuff than you need. Don't even look at all my stuff on here. We'll be here for days. This is what you're going to have right here. It's going to be beautiful. And even if you don't have your access code today, it's fine. I still want you to do all of this. And once you get to this point, if you want to click on the course, you can. And if you want to wait for me to walk you through. I got one to turn all this stuff on. Okay, I'm going to kind of go to the next place because I know some people are there with me. And if I need to go back, I can so definitely go back. So once you get your login and password and you click on the course, you're going to get this little information. I've already done all this, but you're going to get this thing. It's going to say, do you promise to do this, 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 and this? And you're going to just click accept. Yes, I promise you my first 5 children and all that stuff. And I'll gladly get them mine. Anyway, but And then eventually you're going to get to the point where it's going to ask you for an access code. So you're going to have 3 options on that access code thing. One option is that if you purchase the book or you purchase the access code standalone in a hard copy, it's going to look, oh, look, I have some, okay, it's going to look like this, kind of, sort of. It should say My Labs Plus something. It's kind of orange and white, and it came stuck inside of your book in the front of your book. So sorry about that. Okay, so it should look something like this. If you have that, you're going to open it up and you're going to peel off the little stuff here and you're going to type that in. Okay, and that's your access code. If you are like, forget this, I'm not buying the book, I don't need the book, I don't want the book, that's fine. You don't have to. You can put a credit card in right there. You can purchase it. You just click buy now. You give it a credit card information or a bank debit card. If you have a prepaid Visa card, one of those things, it will not work. It just doesn't like those. It doesn't know how much money's on that, and it won't do it. But a bank debit card or a credit card, you can purchase it. The third option is, and this is what I'm going to tell you to do today, if you don't either have the credit card to purchase it with or you don't have the code, you can do pay later. Now, here's the problem with the pay later, is you get 14 days from today, okay? And it's almost always on the day something's due. And you can't, so if you go buy the code tomorrow, you can't put the code in tomorrow. You have to hang on to it for 14 days. So I would open it up, take a picture of it, and have it on your phone with you. So when you log in, because what happens is on that 14th day, which would be like the 15th of June, you're going to log in and it's going to say, hey, you got to buy an access code now. And at that time you have to put in a code. So, but I need you to get in today. So if you don't have your code and you don't have a credit card or debit card, go ahead and click pay later and go for it. And it's going to send you right slap dab into the course. It's amazing. It's just magic stuff. And once that happens, you're going to have that nifty neato code and you're going to have this nifty neato class and you're going to click on the class and your screen is going to look like you see on my screen now. And it's going to say online MA 0103. Go for it. And now I'm going to sit here and wait for somebody to tell me they're there or ask me a question.
I hit the reset password and I typed in my net ID and I never got an email.
Oh, that's horrible. When did you add this class, Mark? You've been on the roll. No, you should be there. Okay. And you went to your MSU email?
Yes, ma'am.
Check your junk mail.
Did you put in your personal email or did you put in like your net ID at msstate.edu?
I put in my net ID.
Okay, well then I don't know why I did it.
Yeah. Now, for your username, did you just put in your net ID or did you put in your whole email address?
I just put in my net ID.
Okay.
Okay.
So, because you should get this it comes from Pearson and it says something like password reset.
Okay.
Sometimes it goes to junk mail. It shouldn't, but sometimes it does. I learned this spring I had junk mail. I didn't even know I had junk mail. I found all kinds of stuff in my junk mail. I was like, holy cow. Start checking my junk mail. I got enough junk mail. I thought surely my email wasn't filtering anything. Apparently it was. You should have a lockdown browser quiz on here. I don't know what your lockdown browser quiz is. Okay. We'll talk about the lockdown browser quiz later. You have to have the lockdown browser, Pearson's lockdown browser, and there should be, I don't know why it's not popping up here. Once you log in and you get to this, you should see all of these nice things on here. Homework 1, there's actually a homework review and there's 2 pieces to this, but and then the quiz goes with all of those. But I don't know where the lockdown browser quiz is. I'll find it and I'll email you guys. But anyway, if you click the lockdown browser quiz, what's going to happen is it's going to say, hey, you need to download the Pearson lockdown browser, and you have to have that before you take your regular quizzes. So I don't know why. And this is my tech issue for today. So if I didn't have a tech issue here, something would be wrong. So I will find the lockdown browser for y'all, and I will email y'all. But you can go ahead and you can actually start working on your homework if you want to. And somebody had problems earlier, and because Google Chrome was being cantankerous, but there's just a couple of little videos sometimes to help you do this. And anyway, so if you watch this, what am I looking at? This is not what is this? These are supposed to be problems. Here's my problems. Okay, I don't know what this is doing. So apparently I'm having technical issues. I know what happened. Okay, y'all bear with me for a minute. See, this is what happens. This is my tech issues today. I need to get out of this. I need to get out of here. I was so in the wrong class. Yours did not say that. Don't even ask me where we were. This is what happens when I have too many classes. This is what your class should look like. Yeah. See, I still don't know where the lockdown browser is. It's still supposed to be there, but it's disappeared. But this is what you should have. Oh my gosh. Okay. Y'all were probably thinking I was totally crazy because you didn't see the same thing I had up here. Here we go. This is what I want you to see. Okay. When you click on these problems, algebra this morning, a couple of people had trouble getting the problems to appear. And so they had to go in and make sure they were allowing pop-ups. Make sure you're using either Google Chrome or Firefox, possibly Edge. It does not play well with Safari sometimes, so just beware. And so just make sure that you can click on a question and you can get these questions. So, all right. And if you can't, let me know. But I was going to show you if you're like, I'm just going to put in numbers here that are wrong because I wanted to show you. Check your answer. I'm still wrong. I'm hard-headed. I think that's it. So notice that it tells me what the answer is. But then if I go, I had that option there, but I can also go back to here and I can click similar question. And it'll just change the problem. And I can make 100. So I can make 100 on every problem. Another thing I want to show you is question help up here. You have a couple of options. Help me solve this shows you how to solve this problem and then makes you work a different one. View an example gives you a similar question. Some of the problems have videos to go with them. They link back to the textbook. You can send me an email that asks me how to work the problem. So you have lots of options here on this question help. So feel free to explore, play around with it. Like I said, I would probably save it before you leave each day, but you can save it and come back to it and back and forth. You do not have to do everything at one setting. So if you've got 5 minutes, work some problems, save it and come back to it later. And then you go on. See, I missed that question because I was hard-headed, but anyway. But now I can go back in and say, but I really want to get it right. And so that's going to be a negative 13. And it says, yay, I got it right. And then I say, it's a save, and now I have 100. Well, I don't have 100, but I got 1 out of 18. So, okay. So at this point, I'm going to, Mark, yes.
I still can't find the email.
Okay. I'm going to have to stop sharing this screen. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to have to stop sharing this screen.